A cruise ship, a rat, and 3 deaths. It started with a bird-watching trip. On April 6, 2026, a 70-year-old Dutch man who had just been on a shore excursion at St. Helena Island, one of the most remote places on Earth, a tiny volcanic island in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean, developed a fever, headache, abdominal pain, diarrhea, flu symptoms, the kind of symptoms that most of us would treat with paracetamol, rest, and a hot drink. By April 11th, he was in respiratory distress. He died on the cruise ship that same day. His wife, 69 years old, fell ill on April 24th. She flew to Johannesburg for treatment and collapsed on the flight. She died in a hospital emergency department on April 26th. Scientists later confirmed she had Hantavirus. So did her husband. By May 10th, today, 3 people are dead. 8 cases have been confirmed or suspected. Patients are receiving treatment in 6 countries. The CDC has raised its response to level 3. WHO has issued international alerts. American passengers are being repatriated to a specialist facility in Nebraska. The cruise ship MV Hondius has just docked in the Canary Islands to begin a 22-country evacuation. And the entire world is Googling one word: Hantavirus. What is it? How does it spread? Should you be scared? Is this the next COVID? And what do you do if you find rat droppings in your home? I am Yogita. This is She Speaks Anyways. And today, I'm going to answer every single one of those questions, clearly, factually, and without the panic that the headlines are generating. Because the best thing you can do right now is understand this virus properly. So that is what we are going to do. The MV Hondius story, day-by-day timeline. Let me take you through the full timeline of what happened. Because the story of this outbreak reads like a medical thriller, and every detail matters for understanding how this virus behaves. 27. November 2025. 1 April 2026. The index case takes a road trip. The person who appears to have brought Hantavirus onto the ship, what scientists call the index case, was a Dutch citizen who had spent 4 months on a road trip through South America. He traveled through Chile, Uruguay, and Argentina between November 2025 and April 2026. He returned from Uruguay to Argentina just 4 days before boarding the cruise. Argentine investigators believe he contracted the Andes virus during that journey, most likely through contact with infected rodent droppings or urine in one of the rural or wilderness areas he visited. 1. April 2026. The ship departs the MV Hondius, a Dutch-flagged expedition cruise ship owned by Oceanwide Expeditions, departs from Ushuaia, Argentina, the southernmost city in the world. On board, approximately 147 passengers and crew from 23 nationalities. Most passengers come from Spain, France, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The crew is largely Filipino. The planned itinerary: Antarctica and several isolated islands in the South Atlantic. It is, by all appearances, a dream voyage. 6. April 2026. First symptoms. The 70-year-old Dutch index case develops fever, headache, abdominal pain, and diarrhea. He's seen by the ship's doctor. At this point, nobody knows what is wrong with him. 11th April 2026. First death. The Dutch passenger goes into respiratory distress. He dies on board the ship. His body is retained on the vessel. No microbiological tests are performed to determine the cause of death at this point. He's recorded as a probable case. The ship continues. 24 April 2026. St. Helena, a fatal shore trip. The ship docks at St. Helena. The deceased man's 69-year-old wife, who has been experiencing gastrointestinal symptoms, disembarks. Approximately 30 other passengers also disembark, including 8 Americans. A bird-watching excursion takes place on the island. At this point, investigators now believe the passengers may have been exposed to rodent-infested environments during their shore excursions. 25 to 26 April 2026. The wife dies. The Dutch woman flies to Johannesburg for treatment. Her condition deteriorates severely on the flight. She collapses, attempting to fly home to the Netherlands, and dies in the emergency department on the 26th April. On 4 May, PCR testing confirms she had Hantavirus. Contact tracing for all passengers on her Johannesburg flight is immediately initiated. 28 April 2 May 2026. More cases emerge. A third passenger, a German woman, develops fever and malaise on April 28th. She progresses to pneumonia and dies on board on May 2nd. A British passenger is medically evacuated to South Africa in critical condition. Additional passengers develop symptoms across the ship. 2 May 2026. Who is notified? The UK notifies the World Health Organization of the cluster. On the same day, laboratory testing in South Africa confirms Hantavirus in one critically ill patient. The international response begins. 6 May 2026. Andes virus confirmed. Scientists confirm the specific strain Andes virus, the only known hantavirus capable of human-to-human transmission. The ship departs for the Canary Islands. 10 May 2026. Today, the ship arrives. Repatriated to their home countries. American passengers are being transported to a specialist facility in Nebraska. 7 US states are monitoring returned passengers. 2 UK nationals have confirmed infections. A patient is confirmed in Switzerland. Cases or suspects now exist in South Africa, Germany, the Netherlands, France, Spain, the UK, and Switzerland. The world is watching. What is Hantavirus? The full science, simply explained. So what exactly is Hantavirus? Let me explain this clearly, because most of the coverage you will see online either oversimplifies it or makes it sound more frightening than the science actually warrants. Hantaviruses are a family or group of viruses. Not one single virus, but a whole family of related viruses, each one carried by a specific species of rodent. They are what scientists call zoonotic viruses, viruses that live in animals and can, under certain conditions, jump to humans. The Hantavirus family is not new. These viruses have existed for thousands of years. Some researchers believe they co-evolved with their rodent hosts over millions of years. They were first identified and named during the Korean War in the early 1950s, when American and UN soldiers developed a mysterious hemorrhagic fever near the Hantan River in Korea. The virus was eventually isolated in 1976 by Korean researcher Ho Wang Lee. It was named after the river where it was first identified. There are dozens of known hantavirus strains around the world, each associated with a specific rodent host. The deer mouse carries sin nombre virus in North America. The striped field mouse carries Hantan virus in Asia. The bank vole carries Pumala virus in Europe. Each strain has different geographic ranges and different levels of danger to humans. The vast majority cause either no illness or mild illness in people who encounter them. But a small number of hantavirus strains cause severe and potentially fatal illness in humans. And the one currently making global headlines, the Andes virus, carried by the long-tailed pygmy rice rat in South America, is among the most dangerous. Here is the critical thing to understand about how hantaviruses normally spread to humans. It is almost exclusively through contact with infected rodents or their waste. When an infected rodent urinates, defecates, or produces saliva, it releases virus particles. Those particles can remain infectious in the environment, in soil, in dust, in old nesting material for some time. When a human breathes in air that contains these dried aerosolized particles, they can become infected. This is why the most common way people contract hantavirus is by disturbing rodent droppings without protection, sweeping or vacuuming a mouse-infested shed, opening a long-closed cabin, cleaning a barn or outbuilding, activities that send dust and dried waste particles into the air that you then breathe in. And this is why the single most important piece of prevention advice for hantavirus is never dry sweep or vacuum rodent droppings. Never. We will come back to this. The two deadly diseases, HPS vs. HFRS. Hantavirus causes two distinct and serious diseases in humans. Understanding the difference between them is important because they affect different parts of the body, occur in different parts of the world, and have different mortality rates. Disease 1. Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, HPS. HPS is the form of hantavirus disease most common in the Americas, North, Central, and South America. It is the disease caused by the Andes virus, the strain in the 2026 cruise ship Outbreak. And it is the more deadly of the two forms. HPS attacks the lungs. The virus causes the tiny blood vessels in the lungs to become leaky, flooding the lungs with fluid. The result is a form of respiratory failure called acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS, the same type of respiratory failure seen in severe COVID-19 cases. The lungs fill with fluid. The patient cannot breathe without intensive medical support, including mechanical ventilation or ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, which essentially breathes for the patient. Death can follow rapidly. The mortality rate for HPS is approximately 30 to 40% in documented cases, meaning roughly 1 in 3 people who develop the full syndrome dies from it. In the 2026 cruise ship Outbreak, which involves only the most severe cases, the current mortality rate is even higher. Approximately 60% of confirmed cases have died. However, and this is critically important, these numbers almost certainly overstate the true death rate because hantavirus is often only tested for in severely ill patients. Mild cases are routinely missed. The true number of people who contract hantavirus and recover without ever being diagnosed is unknown. The real death rate is likely significantly lower than official figures suggest. Disease 2. Hemorrhagic fever with renal syndrome, FRS. FRS is the form of hantavirus disease most common in Asia and Europe. It attacks the kidneys rather than the lungs, causing internal bleeding and kidney failure. It is generally less deadly than HPS, with mortality rates ranging from below 1% to about 15%, depending on the specific strain. But it affects far more people globally. An estimated 60,000 to 100,000 cases of hantavirus disease occur worldwide each year, with China alone accounting for roughly half of all cases. Most of these are HFRS, the Andes virus, the most dangerous strain. Now let us talk specifically about the Andes virus, the strain responsible for the 2026 cruise ship Outbreak, because it has a characteristic that sets it apart from virtually every other hantavirus on Earth. It can spread from person to person. For almost all hantaviruses, human-to-human transmission simply does not occur. You cannot catch sin nombre virus or Hantan virus from another person. You can only get it from a rodent or its waste. This is why hantavirus outbreaks are almost always isolated cases. Someone cleans a rodent-infested building, breathes in contaminated dust, and becomes ill. Their family, their colleagues, their healthcare workers do not catch it from them. The Andes virus is different. It is the only hantavirus in the world with documented human-to-human transmission. This was first confirmed in a 2019 study published in the New England Journal of Medicine, which analyzed a 2018-19 outbreak in Argentina. In that outbreak, the virus's reproductive number, the average number of people each infected person transmitted the virus to, was estimated at 2.12. For context, a reproductive number above 1 means a disease is spreading. COVID-19, at its most transmissible variants, had a reproductive number of around 8 to 10. However, and this is absolutely crucial to understand, human-to-human transmission of Andes virus appears to require very close, prolonged contact. In the Argentine outbreaks, it was primarily household contacts, people living together, sleeping in the same space, providing intimate care, who were infected person to person. Healthcare workers using proper PPE were generally protected. On a cruise ship, cruise ship, where 147 people are living in close quarters, sharing dining spaces, lounges, and ventilation systems. This characteristic made the Andes virus particularly concerning. And it appears that some of the additional cases on the MV Hondius may indeed represent person-to-person transmission, rather than all cases tracing back to the original rodent exposure during shore excursions. This is what made this outbreak different, and this is why it has attracted global attention. How it spreads, the one thing you must never do. Let me be very clear and direct about how hantavirus spreads and what this means for your life right now. The primary route of hantavirus infection for most people is breathing in aerosolized particles from infected rodent droppings, urine, or saliva. This happens when you disturb old rodent droppings by sweeping, or vacuuming without protection. You open a long closed building, a shed, a cabin, a basement that has had rodent activity. You handle nesting material from infected rodents without gloves. You are bitten by an infected rodent, though this is much less common. The one thing you must absolutely never do: never dry sweep or vacuum rodent droppings. When you sweep or vacuum droppings, you aerosolize the dried particles, sending them directly into the air you are breathing. This is how the vast majority of non-occupational hantavirus infections occur. People cleaning garages, attics, barns, or holiday cabins that have had mouse activity, who sweep without thinking. Do not do it. The correct way to clean rodent droppings. CDC guidance. Step 1. Ventilate the area. Open all windows and doors for at least 30 minutes before entering. Let fresh air circulate and reduce the concentration of any airborne particles. Step 2. Wear protection. Put on rubber or latex gloves. Wear an N95 respirator mask, not a surgical mask, an N95. Wear protective clothing. Step 3. Wet the droppings, spray droppings, nesting material, and contaminated surfaces with a 10% bleach solution. 1 part bleach, 9 parts water. Let it soak for at least 5 minutes. This kills the virus in situ before you touch anything. Step 4. Wipe. Do not sweep. Use paper towels or disposable cloths to wipe up the wet, disinfected material. Never sweep. Never vacuum. Step 5. Double bag everything. Place all waste, cloths and gloves in a plastic bag, seal it, put it inside another plastic bag, and seal that too. Dispose in an outdoor rubbish bin. Step 6. Disinfect your gloves before removing them. Then wash your hands thoroughly with soap and water. If you follow these steps, your risk of hantavirus infection from household rodent droppings is extremely low. The virus, while dangerous once it enters the body, is not particularly robust in the environment and is effectively killed by standard disinfectants. Symptoms: from flu to death in days. This is the section I want you to pay the closest attention to, because hantavirus is deceptive, and that deception is what makes it deadly. The incubation period, the time between exposure and first symptoms, varies widely from about 1 week to 6 weeks, with an average of around 2 to 3 weeks. This is important for the cruise ship case. It means someone could have been exposed in Argentina in early April and not shown symptoms until late April or May. Phase 1, the early phase, days 1 to 5 from symptom onset. The first symptoms of HPS are almost identical to flu. Fever, muscle aches, particularly in the large muscle groups, thighs, hips, back, shoulders, fatigue, headache. Some patients develop gastrointestinal symptoms, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. There is no cough, no runny nose. Just flu-like symptoms that feel miserable but not necessarily alarming. This is the dangerous deception. In the early phase, hantavirus is almost indistinguishable from ordinary influenza. Most patients at this stage would not think to seek emergency care. They would rest at home, take over-the-counter medication, and wait to feel better. Phase 2, the cardiopulmonary phase, days 4 to 10. Then, in some patients, not all, but those who develop full HPS, something shifts. Rapidly, the patient begins to develop shortness of breath. Within hours, this can progress to severe respiratory distress. The lungs are filling with fluid. Oxygen levels drop. Without immediate hospitalization and intensive support, death can follow within 24 to 48 hours of this phase beginning. This rapid progression from what feels like flu to life-threatening respiratory failure in a matter of days is what makes hantavirus so dangerous. And it is why the CDC guidance is unambiguous. If you have been in an area with rodent activity and you develop a fever with muscle aches and difficulty breathing, you tell your doctor immediately. You do not wait. You do not manage it at home. You tell the doctor about the potential exposure, because hantavirus will not appear on a standard flu test. Warning signs to go to hospital immediately: fever and severe muscle aches with no obvious cause. Fever and shortness of breath, especially if worsening. Any of these symptoms following known or possible exposure to rodents or their droppings. Any of these symptoms following travel to rural South America, particularly Argentina, Chile, or Uruguay. No vaccine, no cure. What treatment looks like. Here is the uncomfortable truth about hantavirus treatment. There is no vaccine. There is no specific antiviral drug proven to treat it. As of May 2026, WHO and CDC both confirm that treatment is supportive, meaning doctors manage the symptoms and keep the patient alive while the body fights the virus. What does supportive treatment look like in practice? For severe HPS cases, it means supplemental oxygen, mechanical ventilation, being placed on a breathing machine when the lungs can no longer function independently. And in the most severe cases, ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, a machine that takes blood out of the body, oxygenates it externally, and returns it, essentially doing the work of both the heart and lungs. ECMO is an extraordinary technology. When started early in hantavirus patients, it can improve survival rates to approximately 80%. That is a significant improvement over the 60-40 survival odds without it. But ECMO is only available in highly specialized medical centers, not in every hospital, and certainly not on a cruise ship in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean. This is why early recognition of symptoms and rapid medical evacuation are so critical. The good news, and it is genuinely good news, is that survivors of HPS typically recover fully and quickly once the critical phase passes. The disease does not cause long-term organ damage in most survivors. If a patient survives the cardiopulmonary phase, typically 3 to 7 days of critical illness, recovery is usually rapid. Researchers around the world have been working on hantavirus vaccines and treatments for decades. South Korea has licensed a vaccine against Hantavirus for use in that country. But in Europe, North America, and South America, where the Andes virus and Sin nombre virus operate, no approved vaccine exists. This is one of the legacies of Hantavirus being a relatively rare disease. The commercial incentive for pharmaceutical companies to invest in treatments has been limited. That calculation may now be changing. History: 1993, Gene Hackman's wife, AMP, passed outbreaks. Hantavirus is not new. It has been killing people for decades. And understanding its history helps us understand exactly what we are dealing with today. 1993, the Four Corners outbreak that put Hantavirus on the map. In May 1993, a cluster of previously healthy young people in the Four Corners region of the United States, where the states of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah meet, began dying of mysterious respiratory failure. A 19-year-old Navajo man died. His fiancée died 5 days later. Others followed. The CDC launched an emergency investigation. Within weeks, scientists identified a previously unknown virus carried by the deer mouse that was causing a deadly form of pneumonia unlike anything previously documented in the US. They named it Sin nombre virus, Spanish for no name, because it was entirely new to science. The disease it caused was named Hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. The 1993 outbreak infected 48 people and killed 29. It caused enormous fear across the American Southwest, and it launched decades of hantavirus research that we are still relying on today. Since 1993, the CDC has recorded 890 cases of hantavirus disease in the United States. Most of them in western states, most of them in rural areas, most of them connected to rodent exposure in homes, outbuildings, or wilderness settings. The overall mortality rate for US cases is approximately 36%. 2025, Betsy Arakawa and Gene Hackman. Many people first heard about hantavirus in 2025 when Betsy Arakawa, the wife of Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman, died of hantavirus at the age of 65 in New Mexico. The case attracted worldwide attention and reminded millions of people that hantavirus is not a historical curiosity. It is present in the United States right now, in the rodent populations of rural and semi-rural areas. And it can and does kill healthy adults who encounter it. Argentina, the world's most dangerous Andes. Virus zone. Argentina, Chile, and surrounding South American countries have experienced repeated Andes virus outbreaks over the past 3 decades. A 2018-19 outbreak in Epuyén, Argentina, confirmed to involve person-to-person transmission, infected 34 people and killed 11. It was the cluster that generated the landmark New England Journal of Medicine paper confirming human-to-human spread of Andes virus. The index case of the 2026 cruise ship outbreak almost certainly contracted the virus during his 4-month road trip through Argentina and neighboring countries. Is this the next COVID? The honest answer. I know this is the question that is on everyone's mind, so I'm going to answer it directly and honestly. No. Hantavirus is not the next COVID. And here is the science behind why. Maria van Kerkhove, the WHO's Director of Epidemic and Pandemic Management, was unequivocal at a press conference on May 7th. I want to be unequivocal here. This is not the start of a COVID pandemic. This is not COVID. This is not influenza. It spreads very, very differently. The key differences are significant. COVID-19 was caused by a completely new virus, SARS-CoV-2, that humans had no prior immunity to, and that spread efficiently through respiratory droplets in casual contact. Hantavirus has been known and studied for decades. Most strains cannot spread person to person at all. The Andes virus strain can spread person to person, but only based on all available evidence through close, prolonged contact, not casual proximity. Dr. Carlos Del Rio, professor of global health at Emory University, noted that when severely ill hantavirus patients deteriorate rapidly, they are quickly isolated or die, which limits the transmission window. The window of when you're going to potentially expose other people while you're contagious is short, said Dr. Abrar Karan of Stanford University. The WHO currently assesses the global risk from the 2026 cruise ship outbreak as low. Prediction markets, which aggregate expert and public probability estimates, show a very slim chance of this becoming a pandemic of international concern. That said, complacency is also not the right response. Hantavirus is a serious disease with a significant mortality rate. The Andes strain's capacity for human-to-human transmission deserves serious scientific attention and ongoing monitoring. And the fact that a virus originating in South American rodents ended up on a cruise ship and has now spread to patients in 6 countries across South Africa, Germany, Switzerland, the UK, Spain, and France is a vivid reminder that in our interconnected world, no virus stays local forever. How to protect yourself right now? Let me leave you with something practical, because knowledge without action is just anxiety. So here is exactly what you can do. If you live in or visit a rural area, seal any gaps in your home where rodents could enter, around pipes, in walls, under doors. Store food in rodent-proof sealed containers. Do not leave pet food out overnight. If you find evidence of rodents, droppings, gnaw marks, nesting material, follow the CDC cleaning protocol I described earlier. Never sweep or vacuum droppings dry. Always wet first. If you are cleaning an old building, shed, or cabin, ventilate for 30 minutes before entering. Wear an N95 mask and rubber gloves. Wet all surfaces and droppings with 10% bleach solution before touching anything. Wipe, do not sweep. Double bag all waste. If you are traveling to South America, avoid sleeping in poorly maintained accommodation with evidence of rodent activity. Avoid handling or coming into contact with wild rodents. If you develop flu-like symptoms, particularly fever with muscle aches and any shortness of breath, during or after travel, tell your doctor where you have been and mention potential rodent exposure. Hantavirus will not appear on a standard flu test. If you were on the MV Hondius or in contact with passengers, you should already be in contact with your national health authority. If you are experiencing any symptoms, fever, muscle aches, shortness of breath, seek medical care immediately and tell them about your exposure. Do not wait. For everyone else, the DHU assesses your personal risk right now as extremely low. There is no community spread. There is no widespread human-to-human transmission outside of very close contact settings. You do not need to wear a mask to work. You do not need to avoid public transport. You need to be aware, informed, and sensible. And that is exactly what you are. Having watched this video, my honest take, I want to say something to you directly about how to hold information like this. Every time a new virus makes headlines, there is a tension between two very human instincts. The instinct to dismiss it, to say, it's just the media being dramatic, and scroll past. And the instinct to panic, to catastrophize, to see COVID everywhere, to feel unsafe in the world. Neither of those responses serves you. The first leaves you uninformed. The second leaves you frightened without reason. What serves you is exactly what you have done today. You sat with the facts. You learned what Hantavirus is, how it spreads, what the symptoms look like, and what the actual risk assessment from the world's leading health authorities says. You are now more informed about this disease than the vast majority of people watching the headlines. The 2026 cruise ship Outbreak is a serious public health event that deserves serious monitoring. It is not the start of a pandemic. It will be contained. The people who were on that ship are receiving world-class care across multiple countries. And the scientists who study Hantavirus, who have been watching it for decades, are doing exactly what they need to be doing. What you need to do? Know the symptoms, know how to safely clean rodent droppings, and know when to tell a doctor about potential exposure. That is it. That is what good public health looks like from where you are sitting. Share this video with someone who has been worried about Hantavirus but does not know where to find reliable information. Leave me a comment telling me what surprised you most about this virus. And subscribe to She Speaks Anyways, because I will keep bringing you the facts clearly, without panic, without politics. I am Yogita, and every voice matters, including yours.